Let's shift back to intellectual strategies and the firm name intellectual strategies. That's the firm name, and so it doesn't immediately scream law firm. I love that part of it. Your marketing is also really laser focused. It's focused on founders, disruptors, VC backed companies, which is fantastic. Um, I am curious because you're so intentional about shaping the brand and the model that you have, and so how did you become so intentional about shaping the brand, shaping the model, and that ideal client that you wanted to serve?
Oh, that's another long journey, I think. I mean, believe it or not, it started because of my IP practice. I was helping these big companies like IBM build portfolios of patents, and at one point I'm like, I see the big companies, I help them put patents in their armory, and what does all that mean? Um, but I see my small clients, and I help them put one patent, first patent together, and it's awesome, right? It means everything to them. I've had people come to my office with drinks and champagne, I'm in Utah, so a lot of times it's apple cider or whatever, sparkling apple cider, and they want to celebrate the fact that this has just been filed, right? Because that's how much it means to them. But as I was going through that, I started thinking, well, how do I figure out more about IP strategy? And then I realized IP strategy is just one version of general business strategy. And then I started studying business strategy, and that's kind of what led me to go back to get my MBA. And when you go look at business strategy, it's one of the most confusing fields out there. Everybody has a different definition. Nobody knows how to describe it in a way that any small business owner can just take it and use it. And so I actually went down this whole path for years, just kind of intentionally but tangentially to running a practice. And I said, how do I make this easier for myself, for my clients? I came up with my own definition of strategy, and that's really framed how I've done things in my law firm, Intellectual Strategies, since then. So that's probably the rough version of the story.
Yeah. I'm so curious about like patent trolls. Do you ever deal with like patent trolls? Is that still a big issue? I mean, in the past, I'd heard about it before. Is that even something you have to deal with on a regular basis?
We do deal with people who, yeah, I won't get into the definition of patent trolls and all that, but we deal with people who are asserting wild claims based on patents. And
Yeah.
we did a case with a client uh, a year or two ago. We finally settled it. And, it comes down to how belligerent people are a lot of times and how much money they have behind their belligerence. And so, uh, I think we had a really winning case, but we ended up settling because in the end it was easier and more efficient to do that after some initial fighting than to take it the full way. Although I think
Yeah.
we would have won had we taken it the whole way, all the way. It just would have cost our client a lot more, and that's wasn't necessarily in their best interest.
Was it harder for you in that situation to advise them that it's better to probably settle, or do you think it was harder for them to accept the fact that they need to settle? I'm curious about that because I'm sure it probably pissed you off.
You know what's funny is I don't do litigation myself. I brought a friend in because we had when you're doing fractional, and I was like, I don't do litigation. I don't want to do litigation, but fractional, you're their guy. And so problems come up, you're like, enough problems are coming up. I should just bring someone who does litigation onto the team because that's kind of the whole model of a fractional legal team. Anyway, the litigator I brought on, he is the most level-headed guy that I know, and I get fired up, like you said, somebody files something, I'm like, this is ridiculous. This does not make sense. It's like we got to fight this stuff. I don't necessarily take that emotion to the client. I try to take them something a little bit more tempered and say, hey, here are your options. But it fires the clients up too because they're like, "What is this? This doesn't make any sense." Like they've got this thing and we've got this thing and they're totally different. And so clients get emotional and then I have to kind of back down a little bit. I'm like, well, here are your options. Here's how we should look at it. Here's a recommended course of action. It's easy to get fired up, but I'm glad that I have a counterpart on my team who takes the more formal, uh, very level-headed and smart and strategic role for negotiating with the other litigators who often are more fired up than he is.
I'm glad that this scenario came up because I want to know about the dynamic of how it works when it comes to your model and why it works for clients because it is interesting because I'm wondering how much clients, whenever they say, whenever they hire you to be their fractional legal team, how much they think, oh, you're going to do everything. Or I wonder, how do you set expectations at the beginning to say, listen, I don't do litigation, but I do have people that we're going to be able to reach out to, and I'm guessing it's going to cost them more money and all that. So how do you explain that to them so that it still makes sense for them that this is still a good model for them?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, because most of the times when you hire an attorney, generally you're like, I hired you, I want him, I want her, and you think that they're going to do everything. Especially small business owners, they're like, I didn't hire. If you go to a large law firm, maybe there's more of an expectation that they hand stuff off to juniors and whatever. But in my experience, they come and they hire, as my wife says, Jeff, they hired you. They want you to be doing this. And so I've had to be very intentional over the last several years, saying, hey, we are doing a team model. You're hiring me, of course, but you're getting the whole team. And I explain the benefits to it. But to try to really drive that home with them, I go back to my engineering roots, right? In engineering, I like to see the whole system. I like to lay things out. I like to, put tables together. And so I've done that for a lot of the services we offer, including our fractional legal team stuff, where I just say, hey, let me send you a package. It's got a breakdown of 3 different packages that you can select from. It tells you what's in them, and these are starting points. We customize for each client. We've had 2 in the last 3 weeks. We've had 2 great fractional clients come on board, and they're totally different. One of them has a lot of IP stuff that they want included, which we typically, exclude, like litigation and bigger one-off projects are typically excluded from our monthly retainer. But for them, we balance things out, and we're including that. The other client, they're more, they're further along in their stage. They're out there selling products. They're a bigger company, a lot more revenue, as opposed to more of a startup. And so we're doing a lot more full service, spread across the team type of work. There is IP, there is some dispute stuff we're doing, but so I send them this. I say, hey, here are the packages, because what I want to do, I want to empower my clients to make informed decisions. And I say, we are probably a really good fit for a lot of people who we're targeting, because we've been very deliberate putting our team together. So if we're having a conversation, there's a really good chance that we have something we can offer you. But if I just go and say, I do a patent, it's $12,000, and you don't know what that means, because that's the past life I was in. I've watched lots of firms do that, and they're like, you need a patent, it's $12,000. You need a whatever. And I'm like, but what are you getting? There's so many different ways you can do that. And so I say, well, here's how I do it. I've got a basic package. It includes these things. I've got a plus package. It includes these. And I've got a premium. It includes these. And of course, we can customize these, but let me send you that. We'll start there. You get an idea of what you want, what feels good to you, because, it's going to come down to, you want all the services and you want the lowest budget. That's not going to work. But there's going to be some balance in there that does work, and let's figure out where it is.